Hi students, and welcome to our first material for this course. In this video I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Neolithic Revolution, just to kind of tie together the different materials that you're going to be looking at in this week and in this module. So we begin with the Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution is the basis for our study of history because it's the basis for so much of the remains that human beings leave behind that we can use to try and understand them. And it reveals to us something of the genius of human beings, something about what makes human beings special and different from other animals. Simply put, the Neolithic Revolution was the transition of human beings from a hunter-gatherer society, a nomadic society, to one that lived in agriculturally based settlements, in stable societies, where they had a place that they called home, an identity that was based around that home. And we begin by looking at how humans lived before the Neolithic Revolution. We begin by looking at the Ice Age, and then after the Ice Age we have a period of significant global warming where the glaciers around the world melt and in which the earth becomes significantly more fertile. In this situation, there are more crops to eat, crops, fruits, vegetables to eat that are available, more animals to hunt and eat that are available. We see the human population beginning to expand, and human beings are living in this time of plenty where they live in a way that's very similar to the animals. They live in tribal groups of about 50 or 60, and they migrate with the animals and they follow their food supply. And the Neolithic Revolution changes this. And what were the causes behind this change? People have suggested that the climate begins to cool. There's a period of warmth where the glaciers are melting, where there's new fertility in the earth, and that means that there's more that's available for human beings. The human population is growing. Some people have suggested that the growing human population eventually risked outpacing the resources that were available. It meant that there might be more humans than there were plants or animals to eat. And that led humans to reflect on other ways in which they could produce food. Another argument has been that as the melting of the glaciers comes to an end, there's a period of cooling in the planet, and so the food supply decreases. This also, or alternatively, could lead human beings to reflect about other sources of food supply, other approaches to life. Another theory is that human beings were surrounded by all this plenty and all this fertility, and so that led them to think about where and to reflect upon where these crops and these animals come from. But either way, you see that this revolution is based partly on changes to the climate, but it doesn't happen without the ability of human beings to self-reflect and to change their way of life. And in this case, the reflection of the human beings leads them to think about how crops have a cycle of growth, that they can plant seeds in a particular place, they can care for those seeds, and that then crops will spring up. And then they can eat some of the produce of the crops, but then the rest they can sow, and they know that they'll receive a food supply the following year. And this is a fundamental discovery to the beginnings of human civilizations. It's a fundamental discovery for the beginnings of settled human environments. Because now, if human beings are going to care for these crops, they can't be traveling and living nomadic lives. Instead, they need to be settled in a particular place to care for the crops. So their life is going to be easier and less risky, but it's going to be less free. But the benefits are that they can live in community with one another. They have time to produce things, products, for their leisure and to make their lives easier and more pleasurable. They have time to think about aspects of life, aspects of human fulfillment that they don't have the leisure to think about when they're simply trying to survive as nomads. Nevertheless, this transition is not without its challenges. One challenge in particular is herds of animals who eat the crops that human beings are producing. And so we start to find human beings putting up fences to keep the animals out. And then we find human beings recognizing that animals have a similar cycle of birth and reproduction as plants. And so they start to build fences to keep the animals in and to domesticate the animals and to use the manure from animals as fertilizer to make their crops more successful. And so here we see the changes that provide the basis for human beings to live in a stable society together, to live in a sedentary society, and the sophistication that accomplishes that. I spoke about the genius of human beings at the beginning of this video. If you look at most animals today, if you look at any animal today, the animal is living, eating, reproducing in the same way that it lived, ate, and reproduced thousands and thousands of years ago. Human beings are the only species that's radically changed the way they live in this way. And this reveals something about what makes human beings different from the animals, this ability to reflect on their way of life and to change their way of life. There are all these outside factors that support and help the Neolithic Revolution. Changes in climate, the presence of large rivers. We find that most successful Neolithic settlements emerge around rivers because the water provides the fertility that's necessary for growing crops, especially if you're just starting out, you're not very good at farming. And so these are important external factors. But there are many rivers, many great rivers around the world where we don't find Neolithic settlements. And so this shows us that the external factors are necessary to support this change, but that the impetus to this change comes from the human beings themselves, who are willing to make these changes to the way they live, who have the ability to see another way of living, and who have the courage to try it. Hope this is helpful. Hope you enjoy learning more about the Neolithic Revolution.